Thank you. No. Sit. Save it. No. Save it for the end. So I'm trying to figure out what the other 8% is. It must have something to do with something in Minnesota, so I can be reelected. Thank you, Carol, for that very kind introduction. I actually lost my sense of humor during the recount and haven't gotten it back. Well, I want to thank the League. I want to thank Ronald Reagan for these acoustics. He always was a bad acoustical engineer. I'd like to thank Gene Karpinski and the League of Conservation Voter Board and the League of Conservation Voters. How's that? It's good to be among people who understand how urgent it is to address what I believe is the most pressing challenge of our time, global climate change. 2012 was the hottest year in the continental United States since we've started recording temperatures. In fact, it beat the previous record by a full degree. That is a lot of warming, considering that since the last ice age, 20,000 years ago, the Earth has warmed only 16 degrees at most. So you think a full degree of temperature rise in 1 year would catch people's attention. But unfortunately, it has been difficult for me to engage with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle on this issue. I serve on the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, as Carol said. And I've discovered something. If there is a hearing on an issue that even tangentially touches on global warming, the other side just won't show up for the hearing. An example, we had a hearing about a little over a year ago on sea level rise. Okay, their antenna went up. Uh-oh, that must be about... If they could figure out that's about climate change, then you'd think they'd be interested, but only the ranking member, Lisa Murkowski, whose state is melting, showed up. Now, at that hearing, we heard testimony about how rising sea levels increase the size of flood zones during storm surges. One witness told us that a few inches of sea level could result in a storm surge that could flood the New York City subway system. It sounded like something out of some futuristic Hollywood sci-fi movie. The New York subways filled by climate change. Well, of course, 6 months later, that's exactly what happened when Hurricane Sandy hit New York City and flooded the subways. And that hurricane has already cost taxpayers $60 billion. $60 billion. This, and I say this to my colleagues on the Energy Committee all the time. Recently we had a wildfire hearing. I'm saying this is costing us now. A lot of my colleagues just continue to deny the existence of climate change, or if they hold out the possibility that there is climate change, well, this is a problem for, 50 years from now. We're not going to, let's burn cheap coal now to get our economy going, because this isn't really costing us anything. So last week we had, actually, the first time that we had a wildfire hearing, like a couple of years ago, the first time I was in one, because I'm new to energy. I was new I got it in 2011. So the first wildfire hearing, we had a Republican senator testify. And out of deference to Republican senators, the other senators, my colleagues, came. And this senator had big wildfires in his state. And because on our committee we have a lot of Western senators, some Republican Western senators. And this senator, I won't say who he was, but he testified that the fire season was longer than it's ever been before. And the fires were bigger than they had ever been before. And the fires were more intense than they'd ever been before. And it was causing an incredible amount of damage and taking a lot of resources to fight these fires and burning these private homes. What could possibly be causing this? He didn't know. So then the director of the National Forest Service, the Chief Tidwell, is testifying, and it gets to me, it gets to my questioning, and I said, you know, the increased intensity of the fires, the longer season of the fires, the greater size of the fires, could that have anything to do with climate change? And he said, yes. I said, do your scientists tell you that this is being exacerbated by climate change? He said, yes, that's what the scientists at the Forest Service are saying. Well, the next senator, we go back and forth. The next senator, I won't identify him, but he said, I believe I'm the only senator on this committee with a degree in forest management. I believe that Senator Franken does not have a degree in forest management. And I can tell you that the fires are caused by environmentalists. Who won't allow logging on federal lands to clean up the underbrush and rob the fire of its fuel. And he spoke for about 5 minutes. He lectured for about 5 minutes so that the chief couldn't answer him. And it got back to me. This is the fun about being on a committee. And I said, you know, Senator so-and-so is correct. First of all, I congratulate him on his degree. And he's correct. He's correct. I do not have a degree in forest management. But let me ask you something, Chief. These scientists who are telling you that climate change is exacerbating these wildfires, lengthening the season, increasing the intensity and the size of the fires, do those scientists, do they have degrees? And wouldn't you know it, it turned out they did. And climate change is destroying our forests in another way. The bark beetle. The bark beetle is normally kept in check because at certain altitudes, the cold kills its larvae. But as the winters get warmer, the larvae are surviving at higher altitudes. In some Colorado forests, because of warmer weather, one type of bark beetle, the mountain pine beetle, has gone from reproducing once a year to twice a year. In little over a decade, the mountain pine beetle has killed more than 70,000 square miles worth of trees. That's an area the equivalent of the entire state of Washington. Another illustration of the urgency of this problem. Minnesota is a big ag state. 1 out of 5 jobs in our state is related to agriculture. So I pay a lot of attention to how our farmers are faring. In 2012, the historic drought caused more than 70% of U.S. counties to be declared disaster areas at a cost of $50 to $60 billion, according to Agricultural Secretary Tom Vilsack. Scientists are telling us that climate change is exacerbating all of these problems, and they're costing us more and more money. And who is on the hook? Taxpayers. And yet we really can't have a real debate among their representatives in the United States Congress. Now, outside Washington, it is a different story. There are respected leaders, including Republican leaders, who understand the importance of addressing climate change. Former Utah governor and Republican presidential candidate Jon Huntsman, and he came very, very close, has... No, he didn't. Okay, I got him confused with 5 or 6 others. Okay, Jon Huntsman has noted that whenever a party takes a position that runs counter to the position of 98 out of every 100 scientists, that party has a problem. He's right. 98 out of 100 should tell you something. That's 49 out of every 50. Now, do an analogy here, a metaphor or something. Say you went to a doctor, okay, for your annual checkup, and the doctor said to you, you got to start eating more sensibly, and you got to start exercising because you're just tremendously overweight. And I know in your file, your father died at an early age of a heart attack, and you tell me you're smoking. You gotta start working out, stop smoking, and go on a diet. And you say, you know what? I want a second opinion. So you go to the second doctor who examines you, and he says, okay, look, you're really fat. You're just fat, okay? And you have a family history of heart disease. Your father died young of heart disease. Your cholesterol is just out of control. Your blood pressure is through the roof. It would be irresponsible of me not to immediately check you into this place at Duke University and you go, you know what? I'd really like another opinion. So you go to a third doctor, and the third doctor sees you and goes, wow, this is a problem. I am amazed that you aren't already dead. And you say, I'd like another opinion. So you go to now the fourth doctor, and you don't like that, so you go to the fifth doctor. And you keep doing this until you get to the 50th doctor. Now, this takes a few months. It takes a long time to schedule all these appointments, so you've gained another 45, 50 pounds by this time. So you get to the 50th doctor, on one of those electric scooters or something that you're riding on. And he says to you, he examines you, and he says, it's a good thing you came to me. Because all this diet and exercise these other doctors are telling you to do, that would not have done you any good. You're doing just fine. You see, those other doctors, they're in the pockets of the fresh fruits and vegetable people. You should just enjoy life, eat whatever you want, and watch more TV. And then you learn that this doctor was paid his salary by the Cheetos people, which, don't get me wrong, Cheetos are a delicious snack food and should be eaten in moderation. If 98 out of 100 doctors are giving me advice, I think I should take it. And if those 2 other doctors are being paid by big snack food, like certain climate deniers get paid by big coal, I shouldn't take their advice. Well, 98 out of 100 climate scientists are telling us that we've got something of a problem. So Governor Huntsman is right, and there are others. Even some of the very companies that previously funded anti-climate change efforts have turned the page on this issue. ExxonMobil, which used to fund the Heartland Institute, one of the leading climate change deniers, now has a website, and on it states, rising greenhouse gas emissions pose significant risks to society and ecosystems. This is ExxonMobil. Shell Oil states on its website, quote, CO2 emissions must be reduced to avoid serious climate change. Shell Oil. So even the major oil and gas companies have begun to acknowledge that climate change is real, and I just hope that my colleagues in Congress also engage in a serious conversation about climate change. We have to talk about it. We have to come together to address it. The political environment we are in makes this a very challenging task, but I'm doing everything I can. I just wrote the renewable energy section of the Farm Bill. We're talking about advanced biofuels, wind, solar. Minnesota happens to be good at all those. But I'm working on several pieces of legislation on energy efficiency, like retrofitting buildings, which consume over a third of our energy, making them more energy efficient. We need both a renewable energy standard and an energy efficiency standard for the entire nation. These are all important steps that would put us on a clean energy path and reduce our dependency on carbon-emitting fossil fuels. But by themselves, they're not near enough. We also need to make sure we're directly reducing emissions from fossil fuels, and that means making sure the Congress doesn't roll back the administration's efforts to regulate greenhouse gases. This administration has put into place aggressive automobile standards to limit greenhouse gases and make cars more fuel efficient. And I support their efforts to regulate greenhouse gases from power plants. And we need to make sure that they can follow through with these initiatives. Finally, we need to lead the world in clean energy innovation. Last year, the Senate Energy Committee heard testimony regarding a report from the American Energy Innovation Council entitled Catalyzing Ingenuity. The report, authored by former Lockheed Martin CEO Norman Augustine, Microsoft founder Bill Gates, and other business leaders, states, and I quote, "The country has yet to embark on a clean energy innovation program commensurate with the scale of the national priorities that are at stake. In fact, rather than improve the country's energy innovation program and invest in strategic energy national interests, the current political environment is creating strong pressure to pull back from such efforts." We have an incredible opportunity here, so we cannot afford to be timid. According to Mr. Augustine's report, China and other countries are building more energy infrastructure in the next 15 years than the United States has built in the last 100. This is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar effort. I want our country to lead this transformation of the world's energy system by making it a clean energy revolution. You know, I think we have reached, just the week before last, a Sputnik moment. We reached 400 parts per million of CO2. That's a Sputnik moment. I was born in 1951. In 1957, we had a Sputnik moment called Sputnik. I don't know how they knew to call it a Sputnik moment, but it was a Sputnik moment. I was 6 years old at the time. My brother was 11. My parents were scared. America was scared. The Soviets had nuclear weapons, and now were ahead of us in space. In our home in Minnesota, my parents marched me and my brother, my 11-year-old brother and me, into the living room, sat us down, and said, "You boys are going to study math and science so we can beat the Soviets." Now, I thought that was a lot of pressure to put on a 6-year-old. But we were obedient sons. And so Owen and I studied math, and we enjoyed it, and we were good at it. And my brother was the first in our family. My dad didn't graduate high school. My brother was the first in our family to go to college, and he went to MIT, and he majored in physics and became a photographer. And I was good at math and science, too, and I got into Harvard and became a comedian. But you know what? We beat the Soviets. You're welcome. You're welcome. We studied math and science, my brother and me, and we beat the Soviets. And not only did we win the race to the moon, we got a wave of innovation as a result. Everything from transistors to hard plastics, and those innovations spawned industries, many of which are still creating lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of jobs today. We need the same sense of crisis and urgency today so that we can turn crisis into opportunity again. We can't leave the challenge of climate change to future generations. This is even more personal for me now that I'm a grandfather. This is not drawing applause, so don't. But I had a grandson 2 weeks ago. Oh, come on. And I don't want to tell my grandson, Joe, who's named for my dad, that his grandfather was in a position to do something about climate change, and he chose not to because it involved politically difficult choices. I don't want to tell them we compromise our moral integrity for political expediency. So we have to keep fighting. I want to thank you for everything you're already doing to make sure that we don't shirk our responsibilities. It's our moral duty to protect the planet for future generations. Thank you for fighting the fight. Thank you.